Rejoice! Another Friday has graced us with its presence, and this one is bringing presents, which is college football games that actually matter. The college football playoff begins on Friday night, and it starts with a Freaky Friday mailbag on the Austin Birm Show, brought to you by the Waterworks. He is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward, and I am so ready for football to return, Birm.
Me too, but I'm a little offended on behalf of the Delaware Blue Hens and the Louisiana Raging Cajuns that you're suggesting that Wednesday night's game between that pair of programs and South Florida's program in turmoil playing on Wednesday night didn't matter. I'm offended. I'm sure there's games on Thursday night as well that are also going to be a taken offense, umbrage, if you will, at the notion that these non-playoff bowl games don't actually matter for anything anymore. Because my God, do they matter?
They don't.
I know they don't. They're so stupid. We need to get rid of them.
I mean, it doesn't mean that I won't watch them or won't appreciate them, but I'm talking, okay, the return, Birm, of high stakes national championship implication games.
Yeah, that's it.
And on Friday night, we have one. Alabama and Oklahoma. And then at noon on Saturday, we finally get to discover who will play Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl between Texas A&M and Miami.
It's the most wonderful time of year. I just want to say it. I think I heard Josh Pate say it, that maybe the bowl game should go to the same weekend as like conference championship weekend, and then you just play the playoff games after that, or something along those lines. I think there's some interesting conversations that can be had about this stuff because they really should be done and over with, and we should just be able to focus on the games that do matter from here on out so that teams can build their rosters or whatever. But whatever, we're not here to talk about the big picture of college football.
That's Commissioner Zach Boren's job, and we can handle some of that on Monday on the beat when he is here. He has all the ideas, and he will also break down once we resume next week, a busy media day in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and knowing the opponent, Zach will break that down after Texas A&M in Miami for the Monday version of the beat. Birm and I also going to talk about it with some Snappy Jays on Saturday to break it down, but that's not why you're here right now. It's Friday, and we told you send us in your mailbag questions, and you absolutely did. Thank you so much to everybody who fired those off to us at the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. This week, there were only like 15 questions about 14 personnel, so we'll try and get to that at the end. We are setting a record for the most popular topic, I think, in the history of the Austin and Birm Show. So I don't know what more we have to actually say about it. We won't begin there. We will begin with some of the things that happened this week, a little bit of a newsy development with Bryson Rogers on Thursday, having his intentions reported to enter the transfer portal. And Rob sent this in just about that exact same time. What is your best guess on the top 4 wide receiver rotation next season? Is it likely that Mylan Graham, Bryson Rogers, Phillip Bell, or any other wide receivers will head to South Florida? Will Ohio State go big game hunting for a number 2 wide receiver in the transfer portal to fill Carnell Tate's spot, with 2026 looking like an opportunity to be really special on offense? So a lot of questions rolled into one, Birm. Where should we begin?
Well, I mean, I think we obviously start with the notion that Bryson Rogers could potentially follow Brian Hartline to South Florida. As you said, that announced on Thursday that he was going to be leaving Ohio State, and we expect, or I'm expecting, that he will not actually stay with the team through the practices and through the college football playoff, however long that lasts. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't think he's more likely to follow Brian Hartline than he is to go anywhere else. And I don't think I think that's the same case for Mylan Graham if he were to leave, or anybody else who decided to enter their name into the transfer portal. I think everyone's going to look for their best situation, their best opportunity. Clearly, South Florida is investing some money into their program. And if you can bring a guy along with Brian Hartline who understands what he wants, that's fine. But Brian Hartline's not going to be the receivers coach at South Florida, right? So he's the head coach. He's going to have to hire a receivers coach that is not going to be Brian Hartline. So I think that a lot of the conversation around, well, who could leave with him, like those guys don't have any idea who Brian Hartline as the head coach is. So it means nothing that he's been their wide receivers coach. The bigger question here, and I think a more pertinent one for folks to try to figure out, and for Ohio State to try to figure out, is the second part of this question from Rob, which is it worth going into the transfer portal to find a bona fide, established number 2 receiver to play opposite Jeremiah Smith next season, knowing that you have Brandon Ennis returning? Obviously, you want Mylan Graham to return. You have Quincy Porter. You have Phillip Bell. You've got other guys that you think are going to develop into good players. Obviously, Chris Henry Jr. will put into that equation as well. But there's 2 sides of this answer for me, Austin, and it's one, should Ohio State go big game hunting at wide receiver, I think is yes. It would be a departure from the norm. Brian Hartline did not ever bring in a transfer receiver that was a scholarship player because he wouldn't want to do that to the guys he recruited. That was a promise he made, and he lived up to it. Now, will they is a totally different question, and there are multiple layers to that question. But the first and biggest one in the era that we're in college football is that it costs money. And the amount of money that Jeremiah Smith and Chris Henry Jr. Are going to be paid from the Ohio State budget, the Ohio State 16 or whatever, $18 million that it's going to be from their revenue sharing pot is substantial. And so you're going to have to find guys that want to play. Now, the question is, are there guys out there that are going to want to play in this offense next year opposite Jeremiah with Julian Say and everything else that's returning? And are they willing to do that for a little bit of a discount? And like, it's weird because I know people get squeamish at the notion that Ohio State should expect people to come in for a discount, but Ohio State should expect people to come in for a discount because the opportunity at Ohio State is worth a lot more than just the money. So there are certainly names out there already. Nick Marsh from Michigan State is a guy that people have circled and said, well, maybe what about him? I think he's like the perfect complement to Jeremiah Smith. He to me is a Carnell type of clone. So if there's one out there that I'd be like, man, that's one that would be a good fit, it would be Nick Marsh. I tried 3 years ago to get Brian Hartline to recruit Nick Marsh, but they had already got their class of 2024 guys figured out, and they didn't really have the need for it. So yes, they should. Will they? Wait around and find out, I guess, because it is an interesting question.
Well, I do think that Ohio State is more open to the idea. As you mentioned, Brian Hartline made that one of the hallmarks of his room, whether it was just to stick by his word as a recruiting promise or just because he had more faith in his eye for talent and the chops to develop that better than anybody else. Combination of both of those things. He did not want to use the transfer portal and largely did not need to. That may not be the situation for Ohio State moving forward. Part of this is going to, I want to be careful with this. It's going to sound like a criticism. It's not. Part of the adjustment that Brian Hartline has had to made to recruiting that you have talked about, I think, extensively over the last couple of years, Birm, is that the days where Brian Hartline could say, here is number 1, 2, 3, and 4 on my board. They're all 4 stars or 5 stars, and I'm going to get them all. That has changed as the salary cap has adjusted, as the collective influence has changed, as the game has changed, as right now, specifically, the investment in a Jeremiah Smith or a Carnell Tate has, and now Chris Henry Jr. has exploded. And I know that there's always going to be people that say it's Ohio State. You have more revenue than any other program in the country. You should just pay whatever. I understand that you feel that way. I'm coming in from the perspective that that's not going to be the reality of the way Ohio State does business, nor should it for Ryan Day or Mark Pantoni or anybody else. So I think if you were fantasy drafting and money was no object, Nick Marsh is 100% the guy that you bring in. Is it possible that he looks at the decision that he made the first time around, or that maybe wasn't even presented to him, as you mentioned, Birm? Like, I want to be at Ohio State. I saw what Carnell Tate could do. Maybe I could become a first-round pick alongside Jeremiah Smith. The opportunities are there. Some of this notion that Ohio State is clipping coupons or expecting a discount, I think is somewhat misguided. Just because Miami or Texas A&M or USC are willing to pay twice as much money does not make Ohio State's offer a discount in real life dollars. And what players are often taking with that amount of money to go elsewhere is a trade-off for what the quarterback they might be playing with, the offensive system they're going to be in, the NFL draft and Mickey Marotti development and everything else that comes with it, playing in a Ryan Day offense, playing with Julian Sayin, whatever. That's the trade-off that you get. And if you view it as a discount, fine, but it's not wrong for Ohio State to present what it has to offer and say that NIL is only one piece of that. And that's a long-winded way of me saying I think that Ohio State will be involved in the transfer portal for a wide receiver. I don't know that it is going to be someone who is at the very top of the board commanding the highest amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, it is somewhat of a fallacy that Ohio State's expecting a discount. They're not willing to pay as much as other people, so that's the proper way to say it. But it's also a situation where the people who believe, as you said, that Ohio State makes more revenue than anyone else, that's irrelevant to the conversation. The revenue they're allowed to pay football players from Ohio State is the 16.1 or $18.1 million, whatever it's going to be. And it keeps going up every year. That's the reality. Now, how Ohio State is able to balance that amount of money with money from collectives or money from actual commercial interests or outside parties, that is where the difference gets made. But Ohio State has a difficult time walking into a negotiation and saying, well, hey, the limited is going to pay you this amount of money until the limited says we're going to pay this amount of money. So you need to know ahead of time who you're going after so that the powers that be in Columbus can approach the people at the limited or any other business in Ohio, Kroger, whatever, to say, hey, we need X amount of money for this player. The philosophy is going to change without Brian Hartline. That is a guarantee. But it's also forced upon Ohio State because the needs are going to change, because kids are not going to come to Ohio State at the same clip as they did before the NIL era and before Brian Hartline at wide receiver, until they know who Ohio State's receivers coach is. So like if you're Nick Marsh or anybody else, all of this conversation now is moot until January 2nd, until you can actually enter the transfer portal. But Ohio State needs to have a plan in place for that day. So, there's 2 weeks probably from this point until that happens. And so Ryan Day needs to find that receivers coach. And, there were conversations about Cortez Hankins, the former LSU, former Georgia wide receivers coach. He did interview. That much has been confirmed to us, but I don't think that he's the guy that is going to end up being the eventual receivers coach. So there's a lot of moving parts here, including, the first part of Rob's question, who's going to be the likely top four? We have no freaking clue. I mean, there's no way to know.
Yeah, because the second part of this question, the second part of the question was if anybody would leave and go to South Florida. That plays into this conversation. And then the third part of the question, is dependent on what Ohio State decides to do with its roster. And that's not to avoid the question. If we were looking at the way the roster is currently assembled, Jeremiah and Brandon Ennis are obviously going to start. I think right now, I would probably say that Quincy Porter would be in line to start opposite Jeremiah, and then you can move around Mylan Graham, but I know that there's been conversation and frustration that Mylan didn't get to play as much as I thought he was going to this year. Many other people thought they're like, well, he could be unhappy with his playing time. I don't know that. And I hope that we have an opportunity to talk to some of these guys again with, the Notebook and at Cotton Bowl Media Day and maybe the Fiesta Bowl Media Day and get some of the, feedback on what it was like to wait your turn and all these other things. But I almost feel like that's the situation as the roster stands right now on a Freaky Friday. But, that
can change by Sunday.
That projection could change in a hurry in a week's time, a month's time, 2 months' time. We'll revisit that for sure. And that's not to ignore the first part of Rob's question, but man, there's so many factors involved in that.
Yeah, again, the bottom line right now is that the roster can only change in one direction between now and January 2nd, and that's people leaving. So we can't really know what Ohio State's philosophy is going to be or how much money they have allocated or put aside for the transfer portal, because they just don't tell us those things. Because money is not real, and they don't certainly want to put a number out there, because if you put a number out there, then you're sort of stuck to it.
But we do know that Jeremiah Smith and Chris Henry Jr. are expensive. A position that doesn't require nearly as much money, doesn't get nearly as much acclaim, but we have talked about all year long, right guard. And Pat wrote in, he said, we mentioned last week that Josh Padilla was cleared to play the last few games, but we have not seen him. Do we think that is just a matter of Gabe Van Sickle beating him out? We also mentioned Tegra needed surgery, and I believe that he did have that. Do you know if the issue was present during the game? We believe that it was, that's when it occurred. That could also help explain his performance. Thought he was really good against Michigan. Sorry for all the divergence here, but also any sense of duration of recovery would be great. Thanks for that question, Pat. So right guard, I feel like you and I, this might be the most we disagree about a potential strategy like in years.
Yeah, I mean, I really just think that the job is going to be won in practice. And if it's won in practice between now and the Cotton Bowl, whoever wins it should be the guy that plays. I don't want to see any more rotation at right guard. I want to see a 5-player offensive line established. We are very confident, or I'm very confident, Tegra Shabola will absolutely not play in the Cotton Bowl. That is something I feel confident saying. What I can say beyond that is irrelevant and totally a guess and conjecture at this point. All I know is that I was told pretty explicitly it would be unwise to expect him to play in the Cotton Bowl. That said, the conversation about Josh Padilla is a different one, because he was going to be the guy that was going to supplant Tegra Shabola. That was going to happen. He got hurt in the Penn State game, did not play all the month of November, was cleared on the availability report by the Michigan game, actually by the Rutgers game, did not play in either one of those games, did not play in the Big Ten championship game when Ohio State was rotating guards, and it was Gabe Van Sickle who went in. To me, all of those signs point to Gabe Van Sickle, whether Josh Padilla got like future Wally pipped, I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter. I think Gabe Van Sickle has done enough to show that he's reliable and consistent at right guard. And until that becomes an issue for him, as it did for Tegra Shabola, I don't see a reason to play any other games. That said, if Josh Padilla wins the job between now and the Cotton Bowl, I don't think that Gabe Van Sickle should play. I think you're entering a point of the season where there's been one Achilles heel on this offense in the personnel side of things. And there is no reason to keep messing with it if you find a guy that does the job. In the last 2 drives of the game against Indiana, the offensive line looked significantly better and different than it did early in the game. If that's because Tegra Shabola was trying to fight through an injury, kudos to him. I appreciate the effort, and I think people should laud him for that. That said, he's not going to play in the Cotton Bowl. So who is?
Yeah, I really think it's unfortunate, and there's nothing that can be done about it, that Josh Padilla's injury coincided with the exact moment where Ohio State was like, this is the make or break moment. We've gone far enough with Tegra Shabola where we got to figure out if that's going to be the best option heading into the college football playoff. We got a month of reps in November to give to Josh Padilla or Gabe Van Sickle or even Ethan Onyanwa. And they didn't do that at all with Onyanwa. They were ready to do that with Padilla. He gets hurt against Penn State. And a lot of those reps throughout November for Gabe Van Sickle were not like mind-blowing. They certainly didn't change the approach in terms of who was going to start for Ohio State, but the second half against Indiana did occur, and that was the best defensive front and the most pressure that Ohio State had faced pretty much all season, and he handled that really well. So I think those reps have to count extra, and that's the unfortunate part for Josh Padilla, is that I don't think that he got quite back to the point where he was able to compete fully in practice, and certainly not at a level that Ohio State wanted to put him in harm's way in the games. Now, does having an extra month, do these practices that are ongoing right now in these 2 weeks, are they going to be physical enough? Are they going to have an open mind enough to put Josh Padilla back in there after missing 2 months of action? I don't know, but Ohio State proved it was willing to roll the dice a little bit with the guard spots a year ago in the college football playoff. So I don't think Ryan Day is intimidated by that. And I think Josh Padilla has also put in enough work over the last couple of years in the program that they would give him that shot. And I know that we've said over and over, you want to build chemistry and continuity and communication, but Ryan Day also is of the mindset that sometimes playing 25 to 30 snaps at guard can be easier and beneficial for everybody involved. So I wouldn't be surprised if that workload is split in the Cotton Bowl, but I also think that maybe Gabe Van Sickle did enough against the Hoosiers to be out there for the first snap no matter what.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I think he's done it. And again, I know Josh Padilla is really well liked. He's been a guy that the coaches in the program have celebrated since he arrived on campus. You love his mentality. He's one of those nasty interior linemen that you can build a program around, but so is Gabe Van Sickle. And Gabe Van Sickle is 6'5" and 305 pounds. And Josh Padilla is closer to 6'2.5", 290 pounds. When you're getting into big boy football, I think the best upside at guard, the best upside of this offensive line right now, in my opinion, involves Gabe Van Sickle as your right guard.
All right. So every question that I just realized, the 6 questions that we had loaded up to go here, 5 were on offense, where that doesn't really surprise me based on what happened in Indiana.
No, but isn't it crazy? It's Ohio State football in the Ryan Day era, and like everyone's concern is offense. It's I don't know. Is that refreshing, or is it or just another sign that the end is near?
It's weird, but I also have an incredible sense of deja vu from last December. So I did alter the order here so that we could get into one defensive question and break it up, sort of like a halftime breather, because there's not a lot to really stress about. And we did talk about the secondary a week ago on the beat. This goes back to another question that we get a lot. We mentioned, Penn State having interest in Matt Patricia before quickly pivoting back to Matt Campbell and ultimately hiring him. So Adam asked that, he says, I've seen many lists for the potential Michigan job that includes Matt Patricia. How worried would you be if he left after only one season with Ohio State? And do you think he'd be a good fit with the Wolverines? I would be absolutely flabbergasted if Matt Patricia wanted that job, accepted that job, and what the people in that state, how warmly he would be received back up there after his run in Detroit.
He definitely is. Look, I'm not going to sit here and speak for anybody, but we've had casual conversations enough with Matt and his feelings on a number of things. To say that there is no love lost between him and the state of Michigan would be an understatement. He did not enjoy his time there. Obviously, Michigan football is a different world in 2025 than the Detroit Lions were in 2017. Well, actually, not that different because it's a dumpster fire. But he does come from the Bill Belichick tree. Chaos is a ladder, and people can look at it and feel like, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to gain more control, more power over a really great program potentially. But I'd be shocked if that happened. And I think the most important part of this question is to reiterate something we've been talking about for the last few weeks. If Ross Bjork is listening to this, Ross, get that contract extension in front of Matt Patricia ASAP, because it's not Michigan that you have to worry about. It's the next handful of schools, because when Michigan hires a coach, if that happens on Monday, because Kalen DeBoer and Alabama choke in Norman this weekend, and Kalen DeBoer is going to... How
would that be a choke? They lost to them already, like 3 weeks ago.
Because they're a better team than Oklahoma is, or they should be a better team. And if, Kalen DeBoer is going to get blamed for it, maybe he's the guy. And then you have to wonder, okay, so who goes to Alabama? But it's not who goes to Alabama, because Matt Patricia is not going to go to Alabama either. It's the domino effect. Either way, if you're Ross Bjork in Ohio State, you should eliminate this conversation ASAP and put a 5-year contract extension that makes Matt Patricia the highest paid coordinator in the history of college football in front of him. Get it signed. Let him raise his family in Columbus, and let him teach James Laurinaitis how to be a defensive coordinator and a future head coach himself. That's where this should go. It's not really. I don't believe that this is a situation similar in any way to Chip Kelly a year ago, when we were already hearing last November that Chip was kind of not really loving the college experience again. It's not like Jim Knowles and a guy who was just trying to get back closer to home or gain more authority in a defense or whatever.
No, that's what he wanted. I think he wanted the maximum amount of money.
Well, whatever it was, I don't sense that here from Matt Patricia. And he's been pretty honest about things with people when he's been asked. So no, not worried. I think he'd be a good fit anywhere, because this version of Matt Patricia is a really great example for what you want a college coach to be. But maybe that's because he's a defensive coordinator that doesn't have all the pressures that Ryan Day does. I don't know. I think anyone who's including him on the Michigan job list is doing that for fun. Or because his agent requested it.
Maybe, but I don't really think that, and I could be really wrong. I was definitely wrong about Matt Patricia 10 months ago, but I don't think he needs his agent to put it out there. He's built a historically great defense. Not built. He has enhanced an already good defense to a historic level of production this year. And everybody knows the impact that he's had with the Buckeyes. Like, he does not need his agent to do that. He doesn't need, I don't think, to negotiate in back channels. I don't think he needs to create leverage with other jobs to bring that to the table for Ohio State. Ohio State was, again, you say get the contract in front of him. I completely agree. I think the Buckeyes in the athletic department knew that they needed to start that process like 2 months ago, and are willing to go as far as it takes to keep Matt Patricia here. And we've also said, a couple times that Matt Patricia is very much open to staying here and raising his family in Columbus and doing the college thing and being a coordinator for several years, because he's faced that pressure in the other seat. And it didn't go great. That's not to say that he couldn't do it again, because, he is a literal rocket scientist. I bet he could figure out how to manage NIL and the transfer portal and everything else that comes with boosters in this day and age in college football. I bet he could do that really well. So that would make him a good fit for any job. But is that what he actually wants to do? Right now, I would say no, which is a little bit different, where I said Chip Kelly, I think you could definitely get another year out of him, but it depends on what the job market looks like. And if somebody does something that's literally insane, like the Las Vegas Raiders did. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, hiring Matt Patricia, I don't think would be cuckoo, but I didn't anticipate that a $6 million offer would occur for Chip Kelly. And if that happens elsewhere for Matt Patricia, he's going to have to weigh his options. I don't think he's in a hurry to make that sort of decision. I don't know if that's what he wants.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no way to know. But it is a conversation that he's going to have with Ohio State, with himself. I think there was an element of the Chip Kelly hire for Ryan Day that was where Ryan Day needed not a lifeline, but he needed a what's the word I'm looking for here?
He had to go to Plan B because, or like Plan C, really.
Right. Chip Kelly wasn't even the first guy on the list, so let's be clear about that.
Yeah, Plan Bill O'Brien, and he had to go to Plan Chip Kelly, B and C. He had to dip into that, and he needed a favor, and he got one.
Yeah, and we will find out if the Matt Patricia hire is the same way, but I don't think so. Based just solely on the fact that there was no long-term prior held relationship really between Ryan Day and Matt Patricia. But anyway, Austin, I have a confession.
Okay.
I finally stopped pretending that I was fine, and I started Awaken 180 last Monday. I watched you do it. It was really impressive to see how it changed your life, how it changed your happiness, because you seem a lot happier. And I spend 6 hours a day in the car sometimes, and that's just an excuse to not do anything different. But I'm making the change, and the holidays are just giving me another excuse, and I'm avoiding them. Primarily because I already feel better in my joints. As everyone here knows, I've got arthritis issues, and the way I feel just already is making me happy to keep going, because there's a power in waking up eager to start the day, and Awaken 180 is giving that to me. If you've been watching everyone else succeed and thinking, yeah, maybe someday, well, take it from me, someday never comes unless you start today. No excuses. I weigh in again next week, and I'm excited to do it after already losing 10 pounds in my first week. Do what we all did and choose the solution for weight loss online at awaken180weightloss.com.
Awesome stuff. And this was awesome too, because there was a genuine thanks to start and end this email that I have removed so as not to pat ourselves on the back. But it's really awesome, Birm, to know that we talk directly to America, but the actual audience goes around the world. This came from Marco from Switzerland. I can't believe that there are people all over this globe that are listening to the Austin and Birm Show. That feels really cool and rewarding. So thanks to Marco for this note, letting us know that we have touched down in Switzerland. He wants to know if we would prefer for Ohio State an upcoming or young position coach or an established name as the next offensive coordinator. In the NFL, there does seem to be a trend for young offensive coaches, mostly from the Sean McVay tree, becoming offensive coordinators in their early 30s. So this is not, the way I'm reading it, what we want, what Marco wanting us to share every name that could be on the list or report something, just a hypothetical what direction we think maybe Ryan Day should go.
Yeah, but I think what Marco is saying here without saying it is that, is there any validity to the conversation about Nathan Shalehouse, the quarterbacks coach with the Los Angeles Rams?
Passing game coordinator, I believe is
right.
Current.
I think that's really where he's going here. Yep. And it is different. Obviously, Sean McVay has changed the way people hire in the NFL. As a Bengals fan, I wish he wouldn't have. But it is what it is.
You got off track.
It is what it is, because it seems like people are really reluctant to fire his tree for some reason, when his tree definitely needs to be fired into the sun. Nathan Shalehouse, a former Illinois quarterback, young guy, I think he's only like 30. I
wrote about him when he was in college at Illinois for ESPN.com. So yes, I feel old, but I really enjoyed it. I'm just interjecting that part. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, he's done a great job, and I understand why people are talking about him. He's young. He's been in the NFL. He's had a good college career as a player. On the other side of the coin, it's really easy to be a passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach when Matthew Stafford is your quarterback, right? So like, does that translate to the college game where you actually have to develop someone? And we don't know that. I personally don't feel like there's a right way necessarily to do this. We've talked in the past about Brian Dable, and like that sort of pedigree is, in my opinion, the preference, and it should be the preference. So while I believe fully that a guy like JT Barrett or Nathan Shalehouse is a really good choice to be a quarterback's coach at Ohio State, I don't know that I am ready to turn over Ryan Day's offense to someone who has never really runs something like that, but also because Ryan Day seems more and more to be leaning into this idea or the concept of being the CEO, and that next hire for the offense coordinator, yes, they'll have plenty of input from Ryan Day, but he needs to be the head coach of the offense. And I don't know that Nathan Shieldhouse is someone that I would put in the category of being ready to do that yet.
I think this is going to sound like playing both sides of the argument, and maybe I can't avoid it. If Ryan Day is intent on the CEO role, I understand that it's always going to be his offense. His fingerprints are always going to be on it. That I think that his intention with this next hire is certainly to have somebody who is already versed in what he wants the passing attack to do, because, he is replacing Brian Hartline's knowledge and implementation of that passing attack as the offensive coordinator for the last year. So even if this is still ultimately the Ryan Day offense, if he wants to be the CEO, then he's going to need to hire someone to be the head coach of the offense, the same way that he's done with Matt Patricia as the head coach of the defense, or Jim Knowles before that on defense. Walking around coordinators, big picture coordinators, game planning coordinators, play calling coordinators that allow Ryan Day to further take a step back. And so that's why when I looked at it initially, and I don't know everything that Brian Daboll knows about the passing attack. I don't know how much of what Ryan Day or Chip Kelly have done is part of his repertoire. I don't know everything about, what he had to change when he went to Alabama for 1 year and they won a national championship. That I think would be part of the investigation process and interview process for Ryan Day to find out. But that profile where you could trust somebody has been in that biggest seat, just like Matt Patricia had been, and Ryan Day doesn't have to be involved in every single meeting throughout the week, throughout the regular season. That would be really helpful. Then if you're able to supplement that with someone like Nathan Shieldhouse, who maybe he could get a co-title or coach quarterbacks, or, I'm not trying to replace Billy Fessler. Maybe he could coach wide receivers as well. I'm sure that a lot of these coaches have that positional flexibility, but someone in that mold, or like JT Barrett or Kenny Guyton, that the younger assistant route, I think, is the better way to go. I don't know that Ryan Day is going to want to hire a young, rising, hotshot coordinator who has not been in the Ohio State program or not worked with him, and then immediately hand over the reins to his offense. I don't expect that to happen. That's a little bit of reporting on my side, but that's also projecting what I think might be best. Someone like, I'm trying to think who else I can bring up so that people just don't think I only care about Brian Daboll coming to
Ohio State. He's a name. He's not a name. He's a prototype. And that's what I think we need to establish.
Yeah. So I don't know who else that would be. And I know it's been frustrating because every week when we're getting these questions to the mailbag, or when we're talking about it at Letterman Row, it's like, hey, who have they talked to? What's going on? And I'm just telling you, if I had names to give, I would. But I don't believe, based on what I've been told directly, that this is the top priority for Ryan Day at this exact moment. I know I'm getting on a tangent. I'm not answering Marco's question at this point, but there is still a scenario, and I'm not saying that it's the most likely or that it's 25%, 50%. I don't know, that Tyler Bowen and Keenan Bailey and Billy Fessler can bridge this gap depending on what happens in the college football playoff. That's not sexy. That's not exciting. And if I'm being honest, I think I would choose the other option, the Brian Daboll prototype walk-around offensive coordinator. I think that'd probably be best for what Ryan Day is hoping to accomplish. If you are moving into this future, and then whoever you hire as the wide receivers coach from outside the program, a younger guy, I assume a recruiter, then Ryan Day is probably going to be tempted to have to get back into holding a play sheet and getting involved throughout the week. And I know he doesn't want to go back to that part. So I think established offensive coordinator is the right way to go. And then you can do almost whatever you want with the rest of that staff, because there's no limit to the size of the coaching staff. We've already seen Ohio State hire 3 offensive line coaches at one time. You can still do that.
Yeah. And I'm not going to rule out the possibility, as you mentioned, that Keenan Bailey, Tyler Bowen, Billy Fessler go out and lead Ohio State to a national championship. If they prove they can do it, then they're going to have themselves firmly put into that conversation. Billy Fessler is one of the smartest young coaches I've ever talked to, and a guy that is widely respected across the country. He's barely 30 years old. Nathan Shieldhouse, again, I'm going to go back to him. I don't believe he's called plays. I mean, anywhere. He certainly isn't doing it in Los Angeles. He's not the reason the Rams offense is what it is. It's, again, Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay, Puka Nacua, and guys like that. But the idea that Ohio State is so desperate that they have to go out and hire a hotshot rising name who was a offensive coordinator for 1 year at Iowa State is not, and he's only been with the Rams this year. Like, I don't think that's, I think that someone whose agent knows that he's got a lot of upside, and as a 35-year-old, he's doing a great job. But I think there's plenty of other options for Ohio State. Whoever the established name is, to me, that matters.
All right. A Brian Dable or Joe Moorhead type. That's the other candidate that I would.
Maybe Bill O'Brien.
Oh, well, I'm not.
Has he been fired from Boston College yet? Probably not.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think that's the.
What about Tommy Rees? There's a name. So let's talk about, if you want to talk about a guy from the NFL. I think when the Browns decide to let Kevin Stefanski go here in the next couple of weeks or days, after he gets fired, that staff becomes available. Tommy Rees is a guy that was linked to the offensive coordinator opportunity at Ohio State prior. I think someone like that, if you're talking about the NFL, makes a lot more sense. Someone who's been around, has called plays, has helped develop quarterbacks themselves. I just don't know that that's been on Nathan Schellhaus's plate. I mean, if you look at his history as a coach, he started coaching running backs at Illinois, then was an offensive assistant generic, then a running backs coach at Iowa State, then a receivers coach at Iowa State, then a running backs receivers running game coordinator at Iowa State, then an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Iowa State, and then 1 year as an offensive assistant with the Rams, and now he's the passing game coordinator. Like, I don't see the allure of a guy that is really not doing anything himself at this point. And it's not meant to denigrate the job he's doing or his upside or his long-term potential, but Ohio State is not in a position where they're going to hire an offensive coordinator who is being like given the test on the job. Like he needs to know that he's already passed it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I bring up Joe Moorhead. Tommy, he's in the same situation as Tommy Rees. Both of those guys have been vetted, interviewed. Like I think both have expressed some level of interest in the job in the past. So that could very well happen down the road. I think that they fit the criteria that Ryan Day would be looking for probably a lot more. I'm going to lump these next two together. I think they go hand in hand. This came from Brad. So with Brian Hartline working 2 jobs and Ryan Day potentially being more involved in the offense, are we concerned about the creativity? Last year felt like Chip Kelly unleashed multiple new wrinkles every playoff game. Can we see some of that coming after some self-scouting? Second part of that, from many of you, but specifically here, Eric from Richmond, a lot has been made of Ohio State using 12, 13, 14 personnel packages. That's 2, 3, and 4 tight ends. You all have shared that Keenan Bailey is a highly regarded member of the coaching staff. Could Bailey have more impact on game planning and therefore implementing an over-reliance on tight end packages? So, again, these are related, so I don't know how you'd like to attack it first, Birm.
Unless Keenan Bailey has Sharon Moore level secrets about Ryan Day or other people on the Ohio State coaching staff, I don't believe that there's any reason to think he's been given input that allows him to decide how many tight ends are on the field at any given time. Like, that's not his job. Obviously, he's going to advocate for his guys. Obviously, he's recruited very well and thinks, and Ohio State believes that those players are making an impact and doing things well. Obviously, the fan base doesn't. I understand. But Ryan Day is certainly not going to let Keenan Bailey tell him, you have to play 14 personnel, like ever. That said, it's been Ryan Day who, from the moment he took over as the head coach at Ohio State, began using more and more tight ends for Ohio State's offense. The 12, 13 personnel looks that we saw over the last 5 years have continued to increase every single year. That's not Keenan Bailey. That's Ryan Day's philosophy. The second part, obviously, about new wrinkles in every playoff game. There's a reason Ryan Day has said all year long that they've been intentionally keeping things slow. They'll put the foot on the gas when they have to. We thought they should have had to against Indiana, and they didn't. We can and have explained that there was a lot of things going on, and maybe that it put some impact on it. But ultimately, I go to this quote from Ryan Day, which was after the Brian Hartline news, after Brian Hartline was hired at South Florida. Good news, at least for me, is that I can spend a little more time in the game plan now with having more lead time going into the game, talking about the Cotton Bowl. Ryan Day will be all over.
Here's what else he didn't say publicly, but is also true. This is Chip Kelly did not solely put in those wrinkles in the college ball playoff a year ago. Do you know who was more involved in the offensive game planning in December of 2024 than he was in
November,
the last 2 months of the regular season?
Probably Ryan Day.
That's Ryan Day. So, and here's the other part. It's not when this staff is so talented and they have this month to prepare. And I know that the first part of this talking about Brian Hartline, but the play that they ran remember we talked with Ryan Day in February or right after the national championship, and they talked about, the motion and switching the feet of Jeremiah Smith and the play that they stole. That idea came from Brian Hartline. Right. So there's still, this entire staff can still come together, but the guy that I think is getting more involved, and he did a year ago and will be now, in terms of putting in these more wrinkles and more creativity and maybe less tight ends, is going to be Ryan Day. So that doesn't mean that I expect him to call plays in the Cotton Bowl or ever again. But if he narrows down what he thinks is going to work, and they get into those buckets that they use, and Ryan Day has more, I don't know, artfully selected them than maybe Ohio State did against Indiana, that's probably where we're going to see a lot of those wrinkles show up. And I don't think that could be solely attributed to Chip Kelly. And I'm not saying that to take anything away from the games that he called in the playoff. I think all the conversations I've had in the Woody is that Chip Kelly is really good when you give him that sheet of plays at picking which one to call at which moment. But the thing that has always, I think, separated Ryan Day throughout his entire career is his ability to game plan. And that's where I think the difference is going to show up in the Cotton Bowl, personally.
Yeah, it's just funny. I mean, the way reputations change and evolve, because as you reread Brad's question here, and we certainly appreciate it, Brad, the insinuation is that Ryan Day being involved in the offense will eliminate creativity from the offense, which, again, is certainly just not the case. But either way, he was going to be more involved in the offense and the game planning for this game than he has been all year, regardless, because he has time to do so. But again, I think it's kind of like a guy that doesn't get to paint every once. He's a famous painter. Then all of a sudden he becomes in charge of the museum, but his real love was painting. His real love is wanting to create something. And so once the museum is running up and good, and you've hired all your caretakers, and then you're like, hey, you know what I can do this weekend? I can paint. And then that guy all of a sudden has years worth of ideas pent up, and like, oh, look at this. I can do this and that. And I think that's what you're going to get from Ryan Day in that Cotton Bowl.
Picasso really hit a low point when he had to run the Louvre.
It's crazy that they asked him to do it. It was as a first-time caretaker.
No.
On the heels of the legendary caretaker before him? No way. Not.
You don't want to be the guy following the guy at the Louvre, even if you're Picasso.
Nope, never. But, the French do things different, and we just need to accept it and move on. But
let's move on, indeed.
I know people think I'm a homer. This is not Homer Birm talking. This is just like realistic Birm. Ryan Day's entire career has been built around his creativity in the passing offense. Like, that is why he's the head coach at Ohio State. He didn't forget how to do that. He has changed his job. He has changed his approach. But at his core, that is still who he is. And if you give him a month to prepare, even if you don't know who you're playing, but for only 2 weeks of that time, the concepts are going to be different. The attacking scheme is going to be different. And I have zero doubt that Ohio State's offense is going to have their foot on the gas when the Cotton Bowl starts. I have zero doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, fortunately, we'll be back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center to see how some of that work is progressing. And then in about 9 days, we'll be getting to see a practice again for the first time in a long time down there at AT&T Stadium. So it's getting close. The holidays are as well. We thank you all for spending part of this Friday with us to get ready for the college football playoff first round games this weekend. We will pop back in on Saturday afternoon for some quick snap judgments on Texas A&M and Miami, some initial thoughts on what that matchup for the Buckeyes might look like. Yeah, we went long, but you know that happens on a Freaky Friday mailbag. Thanks to you all for sending in those questions, and thanks to the Waterworks for helping bring this show to you. We hope you have a fantastic weekend. For Birm, I'm Austin. We will talk to you again on Saturday.